All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Slope Software Open Demo. The recording has started. This recording will be available on YouTube afterwards. I'll provide a link to anybody who is either here today or has signed up and registered via email or via LinkedIn. And so you should be able to pass that link on to anybody else that you see fit who would need to know a little bit more about Slope and the way that we've built this platform for your use. So I'll just start with a quick overview of myself and then about the company, and then we'll dive into what the software is. So my name is Stefan Mathis. I am a fellow of the Society of Actuaries. I worked in direct insurance for 14 years and reinsurance for 2 years. My position is the Chief Product Evangelist of Slope Software. And in that role, I get to tell people all the good things about what Slope is and how they can use it to perform actuarial cash flow projections. So we have built Slope. Slope has been built for actuaries in life insurance, annuities, and pensions to help them calculate cash flows for those same kind of products for short-term or long-term projections. There are opportunities to use this, again, for pricing, for valuation, for modeling tasks and forecasting tasks such as cash flow testing or maybe even investment strategy. So we've had clients from as small as 1 to 2 actuaries to we've got connections with Fortune 500 companies. We currently have concentration in the North America and US, and we are building out expansion for the rest of the world. And really, this is just a way for us to help you understand a little bit more about what Slope is and what it could do for you. So we do want to run this webinar as a little bit interactive if we can. If you have a question, feel free to drop it into the chat. We'll get to those either at the end or in the middle. My associate, Tim Harlan, may be able to answer that question for you in the chat during that time. But what we're going to do is we're going to go through and give you a demonstration of what Slope looks like and how it is used for actuaries in those various functions. We're going to go pretty much straight through about 30 to 35, maybe 40 minutes worth of conversation and talk from me. And then afterwards, we will be able to answer any questions that have come up during the time. So feel free to, during that time, again, put a question into the chat box and we'll get to that afterwards. But so what I wanted to say is let's just jump right in. So Slope Software itself is a software as a service, and it is fully hosted. So those two things mean that one, actuaries never have to touch any kind of hardware or software on their own machines. And two, software as a service means that actuaries can use it anywhere they wish. So I'm going to share my screen right now and for the future, and this is what we're going to look at. So you're going to see that this would be the Slope login. Because this is a software as a service, you only need to have an internet connection and a web browser in order to be able to do your actuarial cash flow projections. This is an advantage because that is a very simple, simple barrier for people to be able to accomplish that. And the fact that you are connected to this demonstration today, this webinar, means that you have an internet connection and a web browser available. So you're all ready to go and you have everything that you need if you were to use Slope software. So again, Slope is a software as a service, and this is an interesting function is that it allows you to do some things that some of the other software that you may be used to doesn't allow. So what you can see is that this would be the login screen, but what I have up here is a whole bunch of other tabs that are already available to me. These are things that I have bookmarked because they are ways that we're going to demonstrate what the software is. So you can bookmark certain models, you can bookmark certain results, and we'll get into that in the future. But the fact is you can look at multiple different views of the model, you can look at multiple different aspects of the Slope system, and you can even have multiple people in different locations looking at the same information all at the same time, because this is a fully hosted software as a service, which gives you a lot of access to do those type of functionality. So the way that we think about Slope is that we do want to start off and we show you that this is what it looks like once you were to log in. So I'm going to get rid of that other one because that was a different thing. So Slope is intuitive. It's designed for easy access from one place to another. It is intended to be something that you can click into and get to some other place. What you'll notice is that we're going to do a lot of clicking today. So we could click on model development, we could click on the file manager, and it would take you directly where you're supposed to be. These different components are what we think of as 5 different modules of the Slope system. We've got model development, which corresponds to the develop up here. You'll see that in the future. We've got assumption management, which is defining your assumptions. You've got change management, which is going to be valuable when we start to compare models back and forth. We've got model execution, which is where you will assign all of your tables and set your runs. And you've got your model results, which is our analyze module. Now, one thing I did want to point out is that Slope is an open and flexible system, and you can dive into every single calculation at all different levels. In fact, those levels, I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of what those levels are. We think of the Slope as having 3 different levels. There is a product level, and there are calculations that are on a certain type of insurance product. So this example is whole life or non-callable bonds. Those products will roll up into a portfolio, and from the portfolio will roll up into a company. So there are 3 different levels of calculation that any model will be including, and you will be able to use those different calculations and different levels to tightly define what you want to have going on at any point in time. You can read up and down those levels from different products. You can read across products at the same level. And again, everything is flexible and it's designed for ease of use and ease of actuarial calculation. Now, those models are considered a product for, a type of product for a process. So your model might be simply a whole life pricing product, and therefore you might not have any other annuities, you might not have any assets included, but you would just have a whole life and a set of assumptions that would go along with that. Or you might have a more complex model for your investment strategy in which you're going to include various life insurance products and various assets and various investment strategies and various roll-ups and various tax calculations at the company level. So again, this is a flexible system. It's dynamic. It's available for you to make it whatever it is that you wish it to be. So once you have decided what your model is going to be, what you're going to use this model for, you've defined your products and your purpose, you've got some ideas of where you want to do it in terms of products, portfolios, and company levels, then we're going to get into model development. And so model development is where you will be defining all of the relationships between the different calculations of your products. So if we were to click into model development, what you'll see is that you have access as a user to many different models. So we can just click into the demo model. And within the demo model, this is a familiar look that you're going to see many times. We've got a lot of different tiles, a lot of different splash screen, different ways of showing you where you are, different ways of getting around to the different parts of the model. You can see we have products, portfolios, and company variables. These are where you're going to define all of those calculation relationships. So we click into products, and again, it would show you all of the different products that are available. Slope comes packaged with what we call a plain vanilla product for many of the standard assets and liabilities that most life insurance, pensions, and asset and annuity companies would have in their portfolio. So you can take this and then start from there and then modify it as you need to, because what you'll see is that we can get into and change any different calculation as you need. So we've pulled up the whole life product, and we use this because it's got some pretty interesting features on it. So this is what you would see if you were to click on any one of those products. You're going to have on the left side a whole list of all of the different variables that are part of this product. And then what happens is once we click on that variable, you will see the formula for that. Now, this may look a little bit different from what you're used to seeing because it should be. This is a no-code formula editor. All of the elements in here are clickable, draggable, droppable. We can change them. We can click on that and change that to a different relationship. We could move it around if we thought it looked a little bit better somewhere else. We can, even add new features or new relationships if we want to. We can click on what we call the circular menu. And it brings up all of the different access to all of the different calculations at all the different points right in one. So you could see we wanted to add a new variable. Maybe we wanted to add it at a product variable. We could do that, or a portfolio variable, or even a company variable if we wanted to read that down here at the product level. Again, we can go back and forth. We do have some system variables such as the time, the monthly time step. We have table access, we have financial functions, we even have some utility functions like a rolling average that's already built in, so you don't have to try to code that. The advantage of this is that, it is intended to be a visual representation of what the formula is, so that actuaries don't have to try to worry about, do they have the right syntax? Do they have the right number of parentheses closing it everything in or out? You can combine all of these if you wished with some more brackets, and so you could see a little bit more visual representation of what you're doing. And really the advantage of this is that it is easily accessible and it's easily understandable. Another great thing about this is that we're going to look at the relationships. This is always continually validating. I didn't really want to change that. So I'm going to confirm that I have unsaved changes. And that's all right, well and good, because it's just going to take those away. I didn't really want to see them anyway, but I wanted to bring up the relationship view. So this is the view of that variable that we were looking at before, cash flows. And it shows us on the left all of the different components that were part of that cash flow. And it also shows us on the right, where does that variable get used in additional downstream parts. So it gets used in taxable income. Taxable income gets used in taxes paid. And we can keep expanding this out more and more as we see a lot of different levels and a lot of different steps of where do these elements go. We can go both directions. In fact, we can say our death benefits came from a lot of different accumulations, death benefits per policy, death benefit ratio, and even a face amount. So this can give you a really quick and easy view of what are all of the different components that are going into calculating your cash flows. Another great thing about this is you should be able to see that these are color coded. Each variable and each level has a different color code, which helps you to understand what different portions are being used and where. So this purple value is a product level value, and something orange or gold here is the next level up at the portfolios. And if we had expanded even further, you would see another level, which is company variables. And the same way, going back this way, some of the inputs, if they're green like this, it's coming from a model point file, and if it's blue, it can come from a table. So it gives you a very easy visual representation of where things are coming from, and also what do they mean when they are part of your relationship or your formula. And again, it's not code, it's a no-code editor, and it's been custom built specifically for Slope in order to be able to make this process and this understanding happen much easier and faster. So once you've done all of your variable definition, and there's a lot of other tools and things that we could get into around here, include adding tags, adding new variables if you needed to, go directly to the model point file definition, and you can change that here. Again, it's clickable, draggable, touchable everywhere else. Once you've defined all of those variables, then you're going to want to put some values in that. And in order to do that, you're going to need to define what your tables look like. So, for example, let's take up the lapse rates. All of the tables, all the values that are going to be used in those calculations are going to be read from tables, whether they're input tables or they are, say, model point tables, which are the surveys of the in-force assets or liabilities or the projected sales or new business, etc. When you have these tables, you're going to tell the editor to read according to the lapse rates structure. And that lapse rate structure would say, okay, I'm going to read by index columns of plan code and duration, and I'm going to have lapse rates themselves within there. So we can see that from here, we could even just click into what are the data tables that are using this one, lapse rates for term, UL, and whole life, use plan code and duration, and then they have a lapse rate right in there. Well, that's all well and good. But suppose that you wanted to change a little bit about what your lapse rate structure was looking like. Suppose you wanted to say we need to add in gender because our lapse rates are going to vary by gender. So we're going to add a new index column that is going to be gender, and it is going to be a string. It is an index column. And so then that just automatically shows us what our new plan code structure looks like. Now, so the Slope system is always continuously validating where your tables need to be adjusted. So you'll see that we now have this new notification that probably some tables need to be adjusted. So let's click over to our data tables. Yes, we can see our lapse rate for term, UL, and whole life. Now we need to have a gender in here. That's really pretty simple. So we'll change the gender, we'll add that in, we'll make as many tables and rows as we need to have, and then we will save again. Well, suppose that we just didn't really like the way that we wanted to do that, and we wanted to reorder this. Again, we can drag and drop these things. We can say, first, we want to look at it by gender, and then maybe plan code and duration. All of these elements are draggable, droppable. We can take them and move them around as we need to. And in fact, if we decide, you know what, I really don't want to do that by gender anymore, let's go ahead and get rid of that. And I'm going to remove that column from our table. Now, if we go back to our view and edit our data tables, you can see that our lapse rates term whole life, well, we don't have any of those errors anymore because the table validates with the table structure. So this is a way to get information. This is a way to structure the information. In order to get information into those tables, there are a couple of different ways to do that. And we'll get into more of those later. Obviously, when you're looking at a table itself, you can look at lapse rate multipliers. You can type in here and type a value if you wanted to do that. You can add, you can download. The thing about Slope is that there is no proprietary data format. So if you had some sort of table that was perhaps an output from an administration system that was a number of, for example, enforced crediting rates for your annuities, and you wanted to put that into a flat file and then upload that into Slope, you could simply upload that. You can make copies of the table. You can import from some other sources. And again, with no proprietary data format, you can import from Excel. You can import from many other different sources that you need to have in order to make that happen. Now, the advantage of having the table values and the table structures separate from the calculation is that we can do some automatic versioning as well. So you'll see over here that this version of the table is the latest version. So let's see if we can find one that's a little bit more interesting. I know that when we have the plan code table, we get some interesting relationships and some views. So let's look at the plan code table. You can see that we have multiple versions of this table available within our product. This means that at multiple different times when this model has been run, the plan code table has been associated with that run, and all of the values in that have been stored and archived to make sure that those are never lost again. So we don't have to try to have different versions of the plan code table, at least in terms of the name. They can always just be the plan code. And then the system itself will track which version was used in which projection. We'll get into that a little bit more in the future. But the advantage is that, again, we can see that if we wanted to switch back to some older versions of the tables, now I cannot change any values in here. I'm trying to change that maximum age to 90, and that just doesn't work because the table that was run as version 2 cannot be changed anymore. If I want to change that to 90, I would have to change the latest version of the maximum age to something like 90. And then once I save a new version and run it, this version will forever be connected with any runs that use that version of the table. And anything before it that used the 110 age would be connected with what was then called, what the values are then version 3. So again, automatic versioning of the tables really simplifies table management. It simplifies evaluating what results came from where and when, and it will allow you to it will allow you to easily get back to any results that have been created in the past, because there's always that record of what has been done and what created it. So we've got a lot of different functionality in terms of how do you get information into the model? How do you get it all ready to go? What happens after that? Well, we do want to make sure that we are looking at our assumptions and we're connecting them in the right ways. So as we're defining, again, we have different types of tables. We have data tables, mortality tables, even scenario tables. One thing that I do want to show you here is the assumption sets. And this is the way that we're going to organize those tables for consistent use cases. So perhaps you have a set of 5 or 10 different tables that you always want to use during your pricing process. So you can create an assumption set that always comes in for pricing, and then you can just select that at one point in time so you don't ever forget to choose the right table. All of these assumption sets are defined such that you can click into any one of them. And again, this is an editor in which you can drag things around. You can drop it and you can say, yes, we're going to need EPAs. We're going to need some annuity cash flows. I don't need EPAs. So you can create a table structure. These are the table structures that are selected for your assumption set, in which these tables will then be applied once you create that projection. So now it's time to talk about that projection. So we've talked about tables, we talked about the structures, we talked about the model calculations. How do you pull it all together? So that's where you're going to be using our execute module. And in the execute module, this is where we're going to combine all of the different elements and actually push, run, get some results out of that. So what you're going to see is that in the top part is where we're essentially doing a whole bunch of our setup. We're going to be calling it we're going to have a model name, we're going to have a start date and what time period it is. We're going to select a scenario table. And in fact, every model has to have at least one scenario table, or it has to have only one scenario table with at least one scenario in it. That scenario could be a level scenario. But the reason that we do require at least one scenario is that once you click run, once you validate and run, the Slope system will spin up virtual machines, one machine per every scenario. So you can see that currently we're using the scenario table of 100 from the American Academy of Actuaries. When you push run, Slope will spin up 100 virtual machines of the size that you choose, from 2 cores to 96 cores. It will run all of your calculations. It will take all of the results from those calculations and write them to a centralized reporting database, and then tear those machines back down again. Now, we often say that when people ask us how many machines do we have available or how many cores do we have available, we kind of go a little bit sarcastic and say, well, how many do you want? But in reality, it is almost unlimited in terms of the number of calculation cores that you could set up. Now, the question is whether or not you really want to do that, and there is obviously a little bit of a trade-off. There's a little bit of trade-off in terms of you do have to start up that many virtual machines, but they all start in parallel. You do have the time in order to distribute the work and collect it back again. You might not be getting as much efficiency out of your calculations each time if you're splitting it across 96 different calculations as opposed to 4 or 8 or 16. And again, some of those things are very model dependent. But one of the advantages is that you don't have to manage that. I can remember in my own experience trying to run a couple of hundred cash flow testing scenarios across 7 or 8 different models, and having to decide I'm going to run scenarios 1 to 17 for the whole life model on that machine, and then 18 to 34 on that machine, and 35 to 51 on that machine, et cetera, so that everything could get done overnight so that I would have results in the morning. Now, because Slope automatically is going to assign all of those virtual machines for you, you don't have to do that. All you have to do is figure out how fast you want it to run and go. Once you've got all that set up, again, you're going to see that we have lots of different ways to define what you're going to do in the Slope system. We have our assumption sets. Once again, we're using a best estimate and a statutory assumption and a common shared assumption. These are stacked and there is a priority. So last one in wins. If you have the same table in both your best estimate assumptions and your statutory assumption set, whichever one is applied later will be used as the table in that projection. Again, you're going to choose which are your different portfolios and different, for example, model point in-force files. And because this is where the no proprietary format comes back in again. You can see that our in-force files are simply Excel files. So many times actuaries use these when they're starting to build their models, or they could even be CSV files, they could be text files, they could be automatic exports from your administration system. The advantage is that, again, you don't have to do a lot of conversion in order to get the information into the Slope system. We could even, as you can see, if we were to click on it, download the file. So it would just come in right now, and it would tell us all of the different things that we need in order to make that work look right. We could open up the Excel file, and I'll drag this over to the correct screen. You can see that it would just come in as a portfolio. It would give us all of the right columns that we need to have. This is our mortgage sheet. We could have callable bonds and non-callable bonds all on the same file, all in the same workflow, and we would just have all of this information already ready to go. And again, down below, you'll see that these are the tables that we have used in this projection. So we can see data tables such as VM20 assets. And again, we can see that all of these were using the latest version of that table as it is right now. But they all came from certain different assumption sets when they were run. And so that is a very easy way for us to tell what values created what input values created the output values that came from this projection. So again, you've put everything together, you've clicked run, it's gone off to 100 virtual machines, all the calculations have spun up, they've gone for 30 years, you bring everything back together, put it together in one results database. Now what do you do with that? Well, now you go to our integrated business intelligence reporting tool that is in the Analyze module. So you can see that when you're in this part, you're going to be working with what are called dashboards. There's 3 kinds of dashboards. There are system dashboards, which are provided by Slope and are pushed out to everybody to be consistent. And then there are shared dashboards, which are going to be across your organization. So perhaps it's an individual lapse rate report that you like, or maybe it's an annuity pricing report that you want to share with some different individuals. Those could be shared dashboards that you would create. And the bottom level would be your own dashboards. And this is the very lowest level. And this is the individual level that only you are going to be looking at, playing around with. Dashboards are composed of these tiles that are adjustable. You can change and add the different elements that are part of them, and they can show you lots of different features that are part of that are different ways of looking at your results. From here, you can look at the different inputs that were used in your run, projection inputs used, all of the different tables that were run. In fact, as we were looking at that old structure, everything on the version said latest. What we can see here is that the version 1 for this table was run when these results were calculated. You could see run logs, which are going to show you all of the different elements of this, of the projection. This is where you would see any errors or concerns or warnings that would be coming up in order for you to be able to investigate and see where do you need to look next. When you put it all together, you finally get some interesting and pretty results. So this is the way that you would see pretty standard assets or liabilities or summaries. Again, we've created some portfolio summaries that are going to help you as a reviewer of the model to understand what is coming out. So you can see in this one, we're looking at invested assets, portfolio earned rate, cash and investment, statutory reserves. You can combine graphical and tabular values. You can see down here, we've got all of the different variables like accrued interest or cash on hand at the various time frames that are in the model and in the projection. So this is part of the flexible and integrated business intelligence tool that's called Looker that we use within Slope in order to be able to get access to results without having to take that last step of combining, on a manual basis. Again, take the whole life model results from 1 to 17 and from 18 to 35 and 36 to 51 and putting them all back together in a centralized place and then doing another transformation on those and another combination there. These are, again, the same information that was in the other look, and you can create different looks, you can create different projections, you can create different runs, you can create different views of all of this information. One of the interesting things is that because everything is already in that centralized reporting database, you can create comparisons across different scenarios. So if you had a sensitivity, if you had a baseline run and a sensitivity run, you can use this intelligence tool to say, what is the difference and where did that allocation come from? Was it from the commissions as you expected, or was it from some other lapse rate that was dependent upon something else? We can also do things like calculating our PBR reserves because we're looking across various scenarios at, say, the stochastic reserve in each scenario combined and compared to the average or so. And the advantage then is that, again, you don't have to do an additional comparison. You don't have to do an additional data port in order to be able to make these evaluations and get the results out that you want. One of the advantages also of having this in this combined and integrated system is that when you have drilled down your results to one single scenario in a single portfolio and a product, and you've even gone down all the way to the model point level, the very, very smallest level, what you'll see is that these tabular results, these values that are listed in this table, are all hyperlinks. And so this is going to take us into our formula, our debug view. So if we click on one of these hyperlinks, because we said, well, I'm going to investigate how the account value goes from 92,000 to 300,000 in just 1 year, I think that might be a little suspect. So I'm going to click into my results, and it's going to bring up the debug view. And what you'll notice is that you might think it looks a little slow, and that's because it's my internet access that is delaying some of the transfer of information from here to there. That's really the high limit that we've seen on what happens, because whenever you are connecting, you are trying to get information from them and from here and from there. So I'm going to fill a little time while this runs. There we go. So it pulls up the account value. So you can see we clicked on that account value of $114,000, and it's going to bring up that familiar view where we have both the formula that we built with our editor. Now this one is not editable, right? Because this is just what was there before, but we can also see the relationship view that was there. Now, each one of these things is clickable. We can drag and drop. We can go into each one of these things and see exactly where we are. We know we're at time 2. Again, that life insurance portfolio for the fixed annuity product for the model point 3. Policies in force times mortality, 1 minus lapse rate, annuitization rate. That all looks well and good. So maybe it was on the other one. Let's go back there and find out if the problem is in our account value per policy. Maybe that's the thing that is causing us a little bit of a challenge. So we clicked on that, and we can see that we started at the beginning of the month with 103,000. and we credited 11,000. I don't know if many of you are familiar with interest rate crediting on annuities, but that one is suspect to me. That's about 10% of the account value for the month. That's pretty good interest rate. If I could get that, I would do that in a heartbeat. Looks like our credited rate monthly is 0.11. So again, we're still diving into this to find out exactly where that value came from. It's 1 plus the credited rate to the power of 112. That looks right. But our credited rate of 2.5, that seems to be suspect. So we're going to find out whether or not it was something in a formula or something in a table value. We can see we're reading if this is less than that, then we're reading a table. Else, our credited rate guaranteed is 2.5. So that's probably where we're going to be having to go and find out exactly what was wrong. So again, we're reading a plan code table. We're going to look and open up that table and see exactly what was going on. And again, it takes us back to the view that we've seen before, but that's okay because we're still in the same model. All it did was add a new window, and we can see that our initial credited rate was 3.0. So there's the problem. We have had a problem because our table for our initial credited rate was 3.0. So what we would need to do is we would need to change that and make sure that we have a credited rate that had the right scale. Everything else was 0.03, and here it's 3.0. Yeah, that was a problem. So you would change the table, you would rerun again, you'd get a new version of the table, you'd get new values in your results output, and you would be able to then understand what things you had and what things you have now. One of the last components that I will show during this demonstration is our comparison module. So this is something that we have built in order to be able to compare models, projections, tables, products, even to say what is different from one place to another. So let's just show you that. We can click on this. We can choose a model. Again, our annuity pricing model. For the fixed annuity product, we're going to look and say maybe a demo model. Do we have a fixed annuity product? Yes, we do. So we can click compare, and then we will see a list of all of the differences between those two, again, models at the different variable levels. And so you can see, if you remember, we ourselves were not editing any code. We didn't, type in if then with a parentheses. But underneath, that's really what's happening in the system, is that it's going through all that if-then logic. If t is less than this or t is less than or equal to time of issue here. And so, again, we have different ways to look at all the different values and all of the different changes from one to another. If you wanted to do all of those changes and you then saw, yes, I like those changes, I think that that's the right change. I've gotten approval from my supervisor. I've gotten some peer review on that. You could even choose to merge certain product changes or model changes. And again, this is more functionality that we're continuing to advance and continuing to build out in the future of this differential and merge, creating a different branch, making some changes, validating that those changes do what you want them to do and produce the results that you're expecting, and then merging them back into your traditional model. So I know that that is a very, very, very high level, very sort of brief overview of the slope system. I don't see any other chats for any questions from anybody, but I will ask, does anybody have a question in the chat that you think you'd like to have answered or you'd like me to give a quick show of? If not, then I think I may be able to give you back another 15 to 20 minutes of your day. Thank you for taking the time to take just a quick look at what slope is. I will certainly follow up with many of you or all of you in the future with an email or some messages on LinkedIn. Finally, how are industry tables loaded? Got it. So I am assuming you mean, say, like an industry mortality table or a standard table. There are multiple different ways to add those different types of tables. So if we look at our tables, for example, when we were looking at mortality tables, we do have a set of standard mortality tables that are already listed. If you wanted to, again, create a new mortality table, you can do it from this little button here. You can even import it from Excel, and you can add those tables in as much as you want or as much as you need. The other way to manage tables and manage files is using the file manager. So this is a way for you to organize all of those different elements that are part of your projection. So you can see that we do have file management systems that will show you. You can look at things like data tables, model point files, mortality files, and your scenario files. Again, this is it's an editor that is essentially what you've seen in just about everywhere else. You can upload files, you can create additional folders, you can edit these. And again, you can see that these tables are mostly in XLS files. If you had CSVs or if you had other flat files, you could upload them here. What we do ask is that when you have created and you're wanting to use a file, you have a header row, and that tells us what those definitions are for all of the different elements in the table. And that's really all you need to have. So you can see that we have in our tables, we've used a lot of different ways of showing those, a lot of different tables that are going into that. All right, you're welcome, RP. Thanks to you for that question. Thank you all for the rest of the people who have listened in. I will say that the next thing is, if you'd like to see a more in-depth demonstration of perhaps a specific process or a specific procedure, I would encourage you to go to slopesoftware.com, request a demo, and put that in there, or send me an email. My email address is stephan.mathis@slopesoftware.com. Howard, good to see you. And you're welcome. I'm glad you were able to participate today. If there are no other questions, I will say one final word of thanks for all of you, and I will be around, and I'll see you later. Great. Have a good day.